Italian Sinti surely lived a period in Germany because they have a very broad lexicon strata from German. This was my explanation. I mean, I found this suffix both in Shinto Rosengro, which is a Sinti dialect, and also I found it in Lombard Sinti, but it was a first description of this dialect.
Welcome to Conversations with Romani linguists. My name is Anastasiia. I'm a promoter of Romani, the Romani language, history, and culture.
And I'm Yaron, and I'm a linguist, and I specialize in the study of the Romani language.
In this series of interviews, we talk to linguists working on the Romani language, and we are eager to know how they became interested in deeper research into the Romani language, what challenges they faced on their professional path, and what fascinating stories and discoveries they had. And today we are pleased to introduce our guest, Dr. Giulia Meli. Giulia is a lecturer at the Department of Literature, Philology and Linguistics at the University of Milan. Giulia, thank you very much for agreeing to join us and to share your experience in the Romani field.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for your invite.
Thank you. And we'd like to ask you for the very beginning a little bit about your background. Could you share with us, please, where did you grow up and where do you live now?
Okay. I was born in Sicily, so I was there up to 18 years old when I was 18. And after my high school, I decided to go to Milan to study literature, Italian literature, and at the university. The name of the faculty is Studi Umanistici, Humanities. But there, actually on my first year in Milan, I attended some lectures on general linguistics, and I discovered there that my main interest was actually a subject of a university. It can be studied because I was very curious about languages, and I always enjoyed learn and study languages. And I asked myself why, for example, some rules were there, or the reason why some words were like we know them. And so when I first when I went for the first time to those lectures, I was astonished that this kind of subject could be really studied and could be put as the main subject in your way in the university. So I decided that I wanted to study general linguistics. And I decided to put in my program, university program, the majority of linguistics exams as possible. So I decided to, and the first course was actually with Andrea Scala, this first course, and I started so in this way with him as a teacher. And when I was finishing my bachelor degree, I decided to my bachelor thesis here in Italy. There is at the time there were bachelor thesis. You had to write a small paper about 30 pages with a tutor, with a professor, and I decided to give this bachelor thesis to write this bachelor thesis with the help of Andrea Scala. So I asked him in general linguistics, and this was actually my first encounter with Romani linguistics because he is a very is a specialist in this field, and at the moment I had to I could choose. I could propose some topic to write this thesis, but he proposed me to study some ideas, and I decided to follow his field because I really wanted to learn the scientific method of linguistics. So I thought this is one of his best domain in which he can operate. So I will choose this topic, the Roman linguistics. Actually, it was a research on lexical strata of dialect, which is Sinto Piemontese, Piedmonts Sinti, okay?
Okay.
French Piedmonts Sinti, so spoken in the south of France. And this was the very beginning of every of my background in both in university stuff and Roman linguistics.
Very interesting. By the way, what is your mother tongue and how many languages do you speak? Could you share with us?
My mother tongue is Italian. I can speak English, yeah, and I made some mistakes, but yeah, I can understand almost everything. And French. During my university, I studied also Russian because I was fond of Russian culture, Eastern culture, and so I decided to take some time to study this language, even though my actual course was not in Eastern languages, nor in languages, but just in Italian literature. And I also know, I also can speak, don't remember, yeah, I studied a bit of Spanish in school and also Romani, but I cannot speak fluently because maybe we will see it later, but I studied much of my study was about already written data. So I never, I had not that much occasion to speak Romani.
To practice.
Yeah, yeah, I can understand, but in interaction it's a bit difficult.
I feel you, because I work with, I promote the Romani language, but anyway, I find it quite challenging to speak because usually we meet Roma people from different backgrounds, yeah, from different Romani dialects, and it's also quite complicated. And when you, for example, as for me, I practice Romani every day, but mostly in written or just with audio. But
yeah.
That's why I understand what you're saying.
Yes, and languages, yeah, the same works for a Sicilian dialect because I can understand everything, but my parents didn't teach me, so I cannot speak fluently in Sicilian dialect, and also I'm studying Breton. French Celtic language, and so I think that's all. I mean, a very, very, very beginning for
that language is what you remember. Amazing! Wow.
This is just how general linguistics works. So the more, the merrier with the languages.
Yeah, very interesting. So you mentioned a little bit, but perhaps you could tell us more. How did you get interested in Romani? Maybe your first impression, your first work or project in this field. You could share some interesting cases which you had.
Yeah, the very first beginning of my interest is thanks to Andrea Scala, which proposed this thesis on this small group of Sinti. Actually, the data were already collected because they were the written. I studied a lexicon, dictionary, which had some phrases Shinto, and I had to study the words from Italian dialects, because these people call themselves Piedmonts Sinti, but they live in southern France. So it was not clear whether they were the same people as Piedmonts Sinti, which lived in Piedmont, or they were different people. So it was a very, very starting, I don't know, work, because I had to enlist all these words, and with the atlases, linguistic atlases, which are these great big works in which you have for each word the mapping of what this word, how this word is said in all, for example, all Italian territory. So there is this book, this collection of books, very, very large books with the maps and, for example, terms of agriculture, terms of the body, terms of in every point of the research mapped in the Italian ground. I don't know how to explain.
Like a dictionary atlas, like a lexicon atlas.
The atlas. There is a Italo. The name is Atlante Italo-Svizzero. So I had to find the borrowings from Piedmontese dialects or Lombard dialects, and I had to relate the word. I had to find the source of the Romance stratum in Piedmonts Sinti, and I had to map, if possible, the source of this word to determine if they were more Lombard or Piedmont, and this was the aim of my first work, and my bachelor.
So these were the Italian words that they used within their Romani dialects.
Yes, these were the Italo-Romance words in their dialect. This was the first, and actually I discovered that they used words from Italo-Romance dialects, but from the region of a region between Lombard and Piedmont, Lombardy and Piedmont. So the impression we had that Piedmonts Sinti in Piedmont and Piedmontese Sinti in France were different. We had this impression, and they actually were a bit different also from these lexical strata. Mm-hmm. And this was the first work, and it was really interesting to me, because when I started to look in the atlases, I thought the first time I thought that they were a bit boring. I didn't know how to deal with this kind of sources, but I discovered during this work that every map, the map of every word, can say a lot of the history of the people they were taught, of the people that taught. They use this word. So, for example, you have two words which are really distant from each other in geographic terms, but maybe the city were in contact. So you have the same word very, very far, and in the middle you have all different kind of words used for the same referent. But this can be the relationship between people could be seen in the map, because it was the only explanation, for example. So I started with this work to understand how atlases that I didn't understand the actual importance of them. Thanks to this work, I started to understand a bit. They are really interesting source, and this was my first. And actually, I didn't. The last part of the question.
What came after that? What was the next stage?
The next stage, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, then I had my master thesis, and I had to decide once again the topic. So I had some ideas in mind, but I wanted to study the time, how time was expressed in the language. So I came back to Scala and I asked something about that. But actually, the ideas he proposed me didn't convince me because they were I had to study a lot of languages, and I had to compare just one single small topic in every language. This is called a typological study in linguistics. And so you have, for example, an idea about a phenomenon, and you compare a lot of languages which are totally unrelated with each other, and you try to understand how this small phenomenon is related, is how it is expressed. So this is a typological study. It's a kind of study you can. I know, Yaron, you very well know this kind of. But when I had to choose, he also proposed me to continue to study Romani. So the same language, Piedmont Sinti, in France. There wasn't a description of this dialect, and we had all this material already transcribed material, and there was no grammar, no description. So he proposed me to describe the morphology of this language, so the inflection of words, how the word function, and all the other kinds of all the functions of, and all the how the language work, how the words work in this language. And I decided to to go further with Romani linguistics, because I prefer to study just one language and to understand the phases, the history, and other things than the typological work kind of research. I had the impression that this could lead me to a better knowledge of at least one language, not a lot of things which I cannot relate with each other. And so I started to. I actually I graduated, so I finished the thesis. And it was about the Piedmont Sinti of France, French Piedmont Sinti, morphology. And so this was a first description of this dialect. And it also had some small chapters with some topics which were dealt with much in a deeper way. So, for example, I acknowledged that there were some new words were built with a suffix. And this suffix was earlier genitive suffix. So I studied how this began, and I described this phenomenon, and I proposed in a later work how this happened, and other small, very very specific topics that characterized Piedmont Sinti.
Can you give us an example of that construction with the genitive suffix?
Yeah, it's for example, you have the word in Piedmont Sinti, for French Piedmont Sinti, but it's an Indian word. You have the word tud, that means milk, and you have the word tudeskero, that means the man who sells the milk. So it in an older stage, it could mean the one of the milk. So
belonging to the milk.
yeah, belonging to the milk, then the one belonging to the milk, and then the milkman.
Now, that's really interesting because my impression is you find that kind of in Northern Europe, in Western Europe, and in what we call Anglo-Romani, which is the Romani words that English gypsies use who speak English. Their everyday language is English.
Mm-hmm.
That seemed to be a very, very productive process. So if we take the same example that you gave, tud, so they have as milk, but then use it in plural, they say tu de mengro.
Tu de mengro.
To the mengro. So instead of it's with imos and then the genitive.
Tu di mengro. Okay. Very, very interesting.
Excuse me. So they say to the mengro, but to the mengro can be the milkman, but it can also be the milk bottle, or it can also mean cheese or yogurt or anything connected to that. So do you think that this is something that emerged in Europe, that technique among Sinti and related dialects, or do you think that it's something older that survived in those dialects, but that we no longer find in the Balkans and elsewhere?
Actually, I remember this Victor Elshik presentation. I don't remember, in 2018, I think, and he talked just about this topic. So onomasiological genitives. So genitives that started to be real names in the nominative names. So, and actually he underlined how this derivational strategy in some way can be found in a broader area, not just in Europe. In Europe, it's very it has a lot of success, but it can be seen also in totally unrelated dialects from totally unrelated in a dialectological way. I mean, dialect. So I think I'm an historical linguistic, so I tend to project in backwards everything. So maybe it's an old strategy which continued which continued or was acquired more success in some dialects, but it is a very, very simple strategy actually to nominalize the genitive, to create very, very broad new lexicon with a very broad semantics. So the tu destro or tu di mangro can be everything which relates to the milk. So maybe I think that in northern dialects, so in Sinti and there is the tendency to specialize this suffix with maybe with professional names. So it's a bit narrower the sense. This is. I don't know if these are my glasses for historical linguistics glasses.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting, and of course it's a very interesting question in Romani because we don't really have much documented history for the language. We don't have text, which will bring us in a moment to the topic of your very extraordinary PhD, which is so exceptional in that it focuses on text. But before we go there, I just want to ask you about one other word. So you mentioned your work on Sinti in Italy, France, and we usually associate the Sinti with Germany. That's the main area where the naming of the group also obviously always highlights the Sinti. So they're referred to in Germany usually as Roma und Sinti, as two separate groups, whereas in other countries the term Sinti isn't so prominent. What do you know, or what does one know in the literature about the connection? How did the Sinti come to Italy and France? Were they there from the beginning? And why are they called Sinti? Where is the word Sinti come from? You had come across any explanations for that?
The last question, I don't have an answer. So I don't know. I don't know why they started calling Sinti, or the etymology of this word. Actually, it's not really. I don't actually know. I didn't have actually the occasion to think about it a lot. I just took for granted that they call themselves Sinti, and that's it. But in Italian Sinti are surely lived a period in Germany, because they have a very broad lexicon strata from German. So this is sure, 100% sure. May sometimes these the words which we found in a dialect, for example in Lombard Sinti, doesn't fit exactly the words we find in Piedmontese Piedmont Sinti. For example, in some cases we have that Lombard Sinti as a German borrowing, but Piedmont Sinti doesn't have it. So it has maybe or an Indian word or an older word, no, a more recent word than Indian, but older than German. So maybe there are two possibilities. They were two groups in Germany and they had relation with each other, or they were the same group, but one went away from Germany before. I mean, between Lombard Sinti and Piedmont Sinti. But the fact that they were in Germany and some part of the lexicon it's the same, that is a fact. So they grew. The Sinti grew in Germany, I think. I don't know why they started to call themselves Sinti, but it is the German layer, the German stratum is their identity feature. I don't know. So they.
Now, Romani is generally a spoken language and usually hasn't been written down, and consequently, most linguists who work on Romani, they investigate the spoken language. They go out and they record and speak to speakers. And your PhD stands out in that it's actually a kind of one might call it a philological study. You worked with texts that you found in the archive, in the library, and you looked at the historical development of a language, and that's probably one of the only or one of few studies on Romani that were done in that way. So tell us a little bit about your work on the Shinto Rosengro and the work by Sigismondo Caccini, and who he was and what he did, and how you came about to work on that.
Yes, and actually, Sigismondo Caccini was an Italian man. We don't know a lot about him, but we know for sure that he met with Sinti, with a community of Sinti, which traveled in the central area of Italy. And we know this because he wrote some grammars and a lexicon and some small tales in this language. He was maybe a poor man. Maybe he was an orphan. We don't know how, but at some point of his life, he started to have relationship with them, and he followed them. Later, he started to write down what he knew about their language. He had a very particular personality, so he loved to go to the libraries and he loved to do research in the archive and about a very broad.
When did he live? When did he live?
Sorry. Right, he is from Mantua. and he lived maybe he was born in 1857, and he died maybe in 1940. But these studies on Shinto were written from the end of 19th century to the first, maybe 1914 is the last one. The last data are collected or are written down in 1914. So he traveled to. He worked to these texts in a long period of almost 20 years. And actually, he was a very poor man. He came in contact with Adriano Colocci, which was an important scholar and a lawyer. He was many things, but he also had an interest, and he was one of the main scholars on Romani studies at the end of 19th century. And this Colocci, Adriano Colocci, was a Marquis in central Italy, and he received this letter about from this Caccini, and who tried to tell something about the book that Colocci had written. And with this letter, they started to be in, a correspondence started, and maybe a friendship, but it was not a really a friendship. They were I don't know the word. They were not at the same height. I don't know. And so the Leonardo Piasere, which is an anthropologist who discovered actually for the first time Caccini's manuscripts, or a part of them, tried to reconstruct the relationship between this Colocci and Adriano Colocci and Sigismondo Caccini. And actually he discovered that it was a sort of Colocci cared about Caccini just to take his works and to publish them with his name in a Gypsy Lore Society journal. So it was a bit a dark story. It was a sort of crime story, but not without crime. But so actually, at the end of their relationship, Colocci couldn't publish Caccini's work with his names, but the result was that these works were never published. So in 1990, almost in 1990s, Leonardo Piasere, which knew about this Sigismondo Caccini, who was cited in a journal, a Gypsy Lore Society journal, discovered this in Colocci's archive. Discovered the manuscripts. So Leonardo Piasere made the first discovery. During my PhD, I proposed to analyze the materials which Leonardo Piasere discovered from a linguistic point of view and a philological point of view, because the texts which Caccini wrote were both grammars and tales, so written data of this dialect, which the dialect's name is Shinto Rosengro. And so I proposed this kind of research, and during my PhD, I discovered other Caccini's manuscripts, thanks to Piasere, actually. because he told me, but why don't you go in Mantua and go in the archive to look if you find something? And I went there, and they were there, the last manuscripts written by Caccini. So
tell us about the moment that you discovered them. That must have been extraordinary. How did you find the room and the shelf or the box, or what did it look like? What was the experience like?
I went in the library in Mantua, and I just saw that in the at the entrance you can see the list of the donors of the library. So you look through the donors, and you see Sigismondo Caccini, and I saw this name, so I was really astonished. So yeah, I asked to the librarians. They had I don't remember if they were boxes or they were in the archive in the I don't know in a hidden place. They took me these documents, and I saw that the main monography of Caccini was there. Actually, Caccini was a very particular man. So I found a text on Hebrews in Mantua, a small. I found the printed edition of I Romi, which is the only publication he managed to do in his life, and I later, 2 weeks ago, I discovered that. Actually, the Gypsy Lore Society journal, the McPhee and the other people of Gypsy Lore Society paid for this publication. So the story is continues. So, and I saw all this. There were seven monographies. The first 6 of them were. Other topics, like, for example, Ebrio of Mantua, Dante, Alighieri, and other things. He had very broad interests. And the last was this book about, it is called I Reietti Cosmopoliti. That means the Cosmopoliti means someone who can go everywhere, because everywhere is his home. And reietti means rejected. The rejected cosmopoliti. So it was a monography about all he knew, all he archive research about what he thought Roma people were. So it from an historic point of view, it's a bit strange. It is not. He's an amateur, and the data which he presents about the language were based on his experience. So they are totally relatable, but the historic interpretations are very. And also etymological interpretation are not relatable at all. So it's it's an amateur, so he couldn't verify his ideas, his hypotheses on history and other things. So he was not trained to do an historical work. So, but linguistic data are very, very, very important.
But it's interesting that although his interpretations then were amateurish, the linguistic data were based on his direct experience and perception. So they're authentic. And he put them together, and that allowed you to bring in an interpretation and, in principle, right, to reconstruct a dialect that is no longer spoken today? Or are there people who speak that dialect today?
No, we don't know. We don't have any news about Shinto Rosengro. And also, he asked a colleague, which did some field work among Sinti in Italy, and she told me that she never heard about this group, and also Leonardo Piasere never heard about this group in among communities, and he proposed that they simply merge with other groups. For example, they at the end, I mean, after Caccini abandoned them, if he did so, it was there was the First World War, so maybe they were disrupted and they merged with other, for example, with Lombard Sinti or with Piedmont. We don't know, but actually there is no speaker of this language, and I could verify that the linguistic data were real because they work. They are coherent, fully coherent. Some you can see from some tales a phase in which he could not handle very well the language, but in other phases he handles it quite quite well. So the data are coherent for someone who knows Sinti language. And it's different both from Lombard Sinti and from Piedmont Sinti and for Estrecharia Sinti, and it's different. It has some features which are coherent and just characteristic of this dialect. So it's a different dialect.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot more to say about this particular work, even though it's just kind of one manuscript, but it's so extraordinary. But I just want to ask you about one more.
Sorry to interrupt, but it's not just one manuscript. I checked. The book I wrote after my PhD, it was which is my PhD thesis, collects every manuscript I found about Shinto Rosengro written by Caccini. So I talked about the last one I discovered, but the book collects every text I found.
I meant to say one source. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
One source and collection of manuscript. But I wanted to ask you just before we close about a completely different topic that you had an interest in and published about. In a different part of Europe, in Bulgaria. You wrote about a dialect which you saw documented in the online dialect databases that I started together with Victor Elchik many years ago, and many other people contributed. This was the RMS database, which was on the University of Manchester website, which the university, for reasons unknown to us, erased and deleted, but the data are still there. But you managed, like many other researchers who worked with that database, you also did some work on that, and you noticed that in a dialect of a group called Kalajdži in Montana, in Bulgaria, that there is a particular ending, and we don't necessarily want to go into all the technicalities of it, but there's a particular ending that, as far as we know, and as far as I understand, only occurs in that particular dialect, right? But usually, or quite often, when we find something that related dialects have something that they don't share, that only one of them has something, we usually think it's something that emerged in that particular dialect because nobody else has it. And yet your analysis proved that actually this is something that could be very, very ancient. Yes. And was only retained in that dialect and nowhere else. And that's quite extraordinary. So how do you explain that?
Actually, the interesting thing, I agree with you, because when something new occurs in a dialect, something that is typical only of this dialect, usually linguists interpret it as an innovation, so something that happened just to that dialect. But when you find something that is in this dialect and it is also in a very, very distant, not geographically, but also linguistically related dialect, if you find the same suffix in both dialects, this proves that this suffix should be older. I mean, that this suffix was there when the two dialects were just one dialect. So in a very, very old, period, when all the people, the ancestor of the people which now talk two totally different dialects, were just one people. So this was my explanation. I mean, I found this suffix both in Shinto Rosengro, which is a Sinti dialect, and also I found it in Lombard Sinti, but we don't know if Lombard Sinti are related with Shinto Rosengro. The Sinti, they are both Sinti, so this does not prove anything. They are in the same group. So, but if I found this suffix both in Bulgaria, in Kalajdži dialect, which is a totally different branch of Romani, and in Sinti. This proves that they were in some kind related, because it's not it cannot be explained with an innovation in both dialects. It could be, it should be it is very, very strange if this happens, because actually this suffix is, I think, it could be linked just to an Indian root, which they etymologically they are plainly explained. So, I mean, I don't know if I explained myself, but
so
when you
find something clarify, we're talking about a past tense suffix that is added to the verb.
Yes.
So what would be the Sinti Rosengro? So keravasta, for example, I used to do something like that?
Yes, sorry. Yes. Keravesta or kerasta for the for the person. And the same happens in Kalajdži. So these
people who are familiar with Romani know that that's very unusual.
Yeah, it's
very few people use it. It sounds very odd to say keravasta. Yeah.
Yes,
right.
because we find usually we find some suffix like as, or the simple s, or ahi, or something like that. But this ta, the final part of the suffix, proves that from an etymological point of view, they are different suffixes which came to have the same function, but they were two different words. So as was the verb to be, the third person, and asta, which is or esta, which is the suffix, was the verb to stay. It came from the verb to stay. So they had very near meaning. They can be interchanged in many languages, and also, for example, in Italian, but they came to have the same. They came to take the same cell of in the system of Sinti and Kalajdži.
So we have a small cluster of questions to conclude, and they go together. And they look to the present and the future. So first of all, what are you working on now? What are your ambition? What do you think you still wish to discover in regard to Romani? And in the broader picture, do you have anything that you think really needs to be explored? Not necessarily that you will explore yourself, but something that you think there's a big question out there in Romani language and linguistics that you think somebody, maybe you, maybe others, should really look at. But let's start with what it is that you're working on currently.
Yeah. Now I'm actually I work at Milan University, State University. I just finished a Ph.D. postdoc postdoc fund about the documentation of Romani in Italy. So I continued to do my research in linguistics, but in this group, in this project, I had to collect all possible linguistic data on Romani spoken in Italy or spoken by people who were in Italy for a long period. For example, I went in June. I went to Piedmonts Sinti, French Piedmonts Sinti, and I recorded the questionnaire of Romani morphosyntax database, and also other texts with some members of the community of French Piedmont Sinti. And also I collected all the edited works about Italian Romani, which is not very studied actually. But there was a journal which its name was Lachodrom, who did a lot of research between 70s and 90s, and thanks to those people, we know all we know about Romani is due to those people. So I collected their texts, and I did some archive research. Also, I went in the fund of Gypsy Lore Society in Liverpool 2 weeks ago, actually, when and there I found the last episode of Caccini and Colocci. Yes, but actually, Gypsy Lore Society journal doesn't have much about Italian Romani. No, so I did this kind of work in a broader group, which as its aim to create an archive, a big archive online on cultural lexicon in the Italian ground. So this big archive, which will be mapped if the project at the end of the project, we will have a site with a map, and researchers and also non-researchers could find in the map all the lexicon about Italian dialects, not just Romani, also other minorities. It's a very, very broad project. And now actually this grant finished, and I started another one on language contact. So in Milan, we study Romani. So in a broader project, we have the aim to study Romani, because here in Milan, it's the main center in Italy to study Romani. And we have to document contact phenomena in Italian Romani. So contact which came from the interaction of Romani and maybe Italo-Romance languages or other languages. So this is I just started, so it is my 8th day. So I have to start with this kind of analysis. This is what I do now. Actually, I continue to do other research, so historical linguistics research, which is in my blood. So I cannot undo it. I don't know. Actually, for your second question, so what I would like to study and what I would like to discover. Actually, I think that about historical linguistics, Romani historical linguistics. So what was the language that Romani people taught before they split, this is a lot of work about this topic has been done, but there is a lot to know, and this can be done just through the comparison. This is basic historical linguistics. So thanks to, for example, Romani morphosyntax database, which is a incredible source of documentation. Okay. Which should be able, I mean, Romani, for example, Romani morphosyntax database is set to discover something which goes with a model that was used to take the data. So a lot of things are already analyzed, but in the questionnaire, a lot of other things are there because they were not looked at the first time. For example, this suffix I found, you could not think about it because it was not known. So when you thought about how to build the Romani morphosyntax database, you couldn't think about this suffix because it didn't exist for the scholars. But I mean, this Romani morphosyntax database has a lot of data which are very useful for historical linguistics, for the reconstruction of earlier stages of Romani. I think that, I mean, this is, I was formed in this university in Milan, so I naturally ask myself about the previous stages of a language. So it's the way I think about things. But actually, when you study also historical linguistics, so you try to reconstruct, sometimes you understand, you find something that allows you to ask your questions about how language works in general. So, for example, now I'm working about on another kind of suffix, which is the abstract, as you iben, ipen, and so on. And to reconstruct the inflection, I had to think about synchronic strategies to build these abstract nouns. So, I mean, through historical linguistics, you can also focus on problems which occurs also in the nowadays language, and you can also I mean, you can, for example, in the if this work about abstract and abstract nouns go on, and I finish and I publish it, I thought that maybe in this kind of nouns happened a sort of paradigm borrowing, but with a sort of with a integration of this paradigm. So you can, through historical linguistics, understand also something that brighten up the actual moment of languages. I mean, this is my interest, right. And yeah, and also the documentation of varieties, which you and other people started, and with the Romani morphosyntax database. Actually, we don't know, for example, in Italy, there are a lot of dialects which are not documented at all. So this could be very interesting for me or for others to do it. So, for example, Calabria Romani, it existed, but we don't know anything about them. Or Naples Romani, it exists, but we don't know anything. So it's a very...
Well, the tool exists, and now, as you probably know, the data are on a repository based at the University of Cologne right now. So we'll put a link on that when we publish this interview. I'll send it to you later. But it's only the data, not the search functions. There's a project underway now based in Austria to reconstruct and expand. So we will restore the tool, hopefully, and waiting for, you can start collecting data already in Italy, because we will be able to integrate them back and hopefully also into an expanded resource. Yeah, that's a really fascinating road backwards into your history and the history of the language and its dialects in many ways through your approach to historical linguistics. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Giulia, very much for this interview and for this amazing adventure into the different aspects of the Romani language, some aspects of morphological aspects, and historical issues. It was fascinating. It was really interesting to find out about your discoveries, about archives. So thank you. And thanks all of you for watching this video. And we are waiting for your reactions. Subscribe to our channels and comment on this video. And see you soon in our next episodes. De blessa.